So, Father Jim, your newest book, Come Forth, The Promise of Jesus' Greatest Miracle. Tell us about Lazarus, the principal subject of the book. Who was Lazarus?
Yeah, so thanks very much. It's good to be on the show again. Lazarus was a friend of Jesus's who was raised from the dead. His sisters Martha and Mary lived in a town called Bethany outside of Jerusalem. And this is in John's gospel. They send word to Jesus that their brother is ill. Jesus waits a few days, finally appears at the tomb and shouts out at the tomb, "Come forth," which is the title of the book. And Lazarus comes out raised from the dead. So it is traditionally called Jesus's greatest miracle. And the book is a kind of deep dive into the story. It's a mix of biblical exegesis, so looking at the Bible story, spirituality, what can this story say to us today, as well as a little bit of travelogue, what is it like in the place where Lazarus was raised from the dead in Bethany. It's in Palestinian territory now, called Al-Azariah, the place of Lazarus. And finally, which will appeal to you especially, some cultural history of Lazarus in fine arts, novels, plays, films, things like that. So, yeah, it's a deep dive into the story of Lazarus.
And tell us about, why was Lazarus so important to Jesus? We hear often, oh, Lazarus is some guy that really didn't. There's no reason for Jesus to resurrect him.
Well, it's interesting. Lazarus is called, very interesting, when the two sisters, Martha and Mary, who we know were Jesus's friends, because in Luke's gospel, he spends time with them at their house. When they send word to Jesus that their brother is ill, they don't say, "Lazarus, our brother is ill." They don't say, "Lazarus, your disciple is ill." They don't say, "Lazarus of Bethany is ill," a very kind of New Testament way of looking at it. They say, in the Greek, it's hon philes, which is "he whom you love." He whom you love is ill, which is a really beautiful way of describing him. And obviously, this is someone who Jesus cared for very deeply. So it is someone who's Jesus's close friend. Maybe some people have suggested maybe even best friend. And so it's something that Jesus does for his friend, but also something that Jesus does for his friends Martha and Mary.
What as you're researching this book and writing it, what jumped out at you? What surprised you to learn?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the most mysterious figures in the Gospel of John is a figure called the beloved disciple. And the beloved disciple is the person who is the source of many of the stories in John's gospel. And many people think that this is John himself, the one who writes the book, the Apostle Thomas. But a number of scholars believe that it was actually Lazarus. And so in the book, I talk about the reasons that scholars believe that Lazarus is this mysterious figure. So a little bit of a detective work as well.
What does it mean to be resurrected? We hear about Lazarus being resurrected, and this guy who's pretty dirty and has been in a tomb for a few days comes out, and probably everyone's pretty scared. That's pretty gross, probably. What does it mean to be resurrected?
Well, interestingly, Lazarus comes out with, as you say, his grave clothes on and his head covering, which is the way people were buried back then. And there's a difference that is drawn in John's gospel between the way that Jesus comes out of the tomb, his tomb on Easter Sunday, and Lazarus does, and it's pretty intentional. When Lazarus comes out, he's still wearing his grave clothes because he's going to die again. Sort of symbolically, he's wearing his grave clothes because he'll die again. He's immortal. He is amortal. That's what I'm saying. Jesus comes out and in the sort of recounting of the resurrection narratives in John's gospel, Jesus's grave clothes are sort of rolled up neatly in the tomb. He's not going to need his again, basically. So Lazarus's raising is it's only for a couple of years until he dies again. And in fact, a lot of people think he was executed by Jesus's opponents because he was too powerful of a symbol of Jesus's power. So it's a different kind of raising. They usually use the word, interestingly, raising, the raising of Lazarus, but for Jesus, it's resurrection. It's a little different.
And finally, what do you hope readers get out of this book? You talk about
Yeah.
people being called forth to new life. What do you hope that readers get out of this?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. And maybe the most important part of the book is, the story of Lazarus might seem like it's what does it have to do with us 2000 years ago? Even if you're Christian and or Catholic and believe in it, you might say, well, that's great. It's a wonderful thing Jesus did. But I think it's a real invitation for us to hear God's voice saying to all of us, come forth and leave behind anything that keeps you bound or unfree or sort of burdened, right? Leave behind the grave clause in your tomb, and come out and hear God calling you to new life. Leave behind anything that keeps you unfree, and hear God calling you into new life, and hear God saying to you, come forth. So that's really the overarching theme of the book.
So you would you agree then that it's maybe popular to think, okay, well, Lazarus, he got resurrected. That was like a nice thing. That was, that was he got to live a little bit longer. But that's actually not the moral of the story. The moral of the story is actually he had something important left to do.
Well, that's right. I mean, the story has something left important for us, right? The story is not just something that we look to as a sign of Jesus's power. I mean, it's obviously that Jesus gives life, and in the gospel story, he says, "I am the resurrection and the life." I mean, that's a really important part of Christian belief. But the story itself reminds us that God is always calling us forth from our tombs, from anything that keeps us dead, that keeps us unfree, that keeps us bound. So the story itself has a lot to teach us and has a lot to help us encounter God in a new way.
Father Jim, how can people get the book?
The book is available in print, audio, and ebook. I read the audio, and it's available online anywhere books are sold. So it's called "Come Forth: The Promise of Jesus' Greatest Miracle."
Father Jim Martin, thank you so much.
My pleasure.